Hi, this is Bug from Follower and Messenger, and this is a quick video I put together of the process of doing the flat coloring for page 18 of chapter 2. Flat coloring is basically just adding like base colors to the page before you add any shading or anything else. So this is kind of how I go about doing that. All the line art is done on a separate layer. I sketch that up in Manga Studio, actually, and export it and then do all my coloring in Photoshop, just because I'm used to Photoshop. I might switch to something else eventually, but for now it works well enough. This video is sped up to 4 times actual speed, by the way. I wish I could color nearly this quickly, but it's not the case. All told, the process takes maybe about 40 minutes for a page like this, even though it's kind of an unusual page with not really traditional panels. But as you can see, I kind of just go around and block in the main shapes. Sometimes when I've thought ahead while inking, I can make sure to close in the line art so I can actually just fill those areas, which goes much more quickly, but I find that a lot of times the line art ends up looking really stiff and mechanical, so I tend to draw, and it's sort of a painterly kind of way. Not all the shapes are closed. As you can see, I dropped in a color in the background so that I can start filling in Dr. Calloway's coat here, because it's really hard to see against the white background. You might notice that this is not actually a pure white that I'm coloring her white jacket with. It's like a 5 or 10% gray, actually. Just a little bit off-white, which makes it easier to shade later on. Just filling in the big areas. A lot of my philosophy about doing flats is kind of just slap the color down and fix it later, so you might notice that I go out of the lines a lot, and then fix it after the fact, because a lot of it gets painted over anyway, and it's faster to just put the color down and tweak it. Coloring Dia's little feet, baby Dia. I find that curvy shapes tend to be the trickiest for some reason. I always end up going kind of out of bounds with them. Worked out pretty nicely. One of the things I do, for Follower especially, is I have saved out palette files for Photoshop, which has all of the basic colors for each character, and they're labeled by character and what element that is. Like right now, that light yellow that I'm using to fill in the fluff in Dia's ears, I just have labeled Dia ear fluff. Nearly anything that appears, at least a few times has its own palette value, which just keeps things looking consistent, and it's a lot quicker to be able to go back just through the palette in the side there and find the right colors. And then I don't have to constantly be referring to previous pages that I've put up to make sure that things look right. But it just gives me a baseline to work with, and then later on when I'm doing shading, I can, alter the colors a bit to fit the lighting or environment, because sometimes that is a little different. There definitely is a better way to do this, and I definitely am taking kind of a slow route on this page. It just happens to be the way the line art worked out. As I was saying, like, a lot of it isn't like fully closed in line art, so if I were to use like the fill bucket tool and try to color this in just off the bat, it would fill the entire page because it's not quite closed as it should be. So I just kind of trace around the edges of each shape and then fill it and kind of tweak the fills, make it look correct. Dia is definitely one of the slightly more complicated characters to color just because she has the striping patterns. So I have to make sure that I get those in correctly using the right shade of brown and, putting all the spots in the right places, which I sort of have memorized at this point, but occasionally I do have to check back and make sure I didn't miss like a spot or something. But she is definitely one of my favorite characters to color. I just like her color scheme. I sort of plan for her to be kind of lively and fun, and colored her accordingly. Filling in the kind of scrubs that they wear. I was kind of thinking like, medical hospital type garb, just because they are in a laboratory environment. Something that's easy to, just throw in a vat of bleach, not worry about it later. Color her eyes in, kind of an orangey, brownish, warm color. And then the stripes, and her little freckles on her face. I always, every time, forget that her feet are basically the darker shade and not the kind of middle yellow that the rest of her fur is. So I always end up coloring it the wrong color and then going back over it anyway, which is sort of a waste of time, but as long as it ends up right in the end, that's fine. So there's Dia. And now Dr. Calway. You can see my kind of slapdash method going on here. The small areas I take care just because they're kind of a pain, but then the rest of it, if I can just drop the colors in quickly, that's good enough for me, as long as it gets done. Calway's hairband. The jacket again. Using the fill method to try and speed this along a little bit. And her pants. I think Calway is really fun to draw. She's just kind of no nonsense. Pull the hair back. Wear really practical clothes. She's very hands-on with the young Chios that she works with, so it's kind of reflected in what she wears. Coloring in the book. Again, it's not a pure white, it's a sort of yellowish off white for the paper. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to put on the page yet. I don't know what they're reading, but I'll think of it probably in the shading phase later on when I'm adding more detail to things. Get the cover. And Calway's eyes, real bright green. and the mission patch on her arm for the base. It's one of those things I'm always worried about forgetting, just for continuity. Fixing up the edges and fill in her shoes, which are really bright. I always think of Kalway as she probably likes really bright colored, fun, cute things, like it's just her nature. And onto this other little section here, just kind of cute little cartoon faces of them singing a song together. See, this is progressing much more quickly because these lines do close up and I can just fill in the areas with color, which cuts the time down immensely. But at the same time, you can kind of see how it looks almost coloring bookish. Like, I prefer not to do that every time. There are instances where it works, but not always. Sometimes just leaving something open and implying a line can help to show like a little bit of depth or weight to an object, I think. Do you get ear fluff again? Kind of a buttery yellow. So you can kind of see why this is called flat coloring, just because for the most part everything is really lacking in depth. That really doesn't happen until I start adding shading later on. Just color in their little music notes. And now, this angry Kalway kind of in the foreground. There's some parts of this that I can just fill in, which helps a little bit. Some of her clothes. But then, like, you get to this jacket portion and it's open along the bottom edge, so if I were to try and fill that in, it wouldn't work out so well. Thankfully, though, it's kind of a big shape, which is a whole lot easier to just brush in really quickly with a lot of straight edges. So I fill that, and then kind of erase out the overlaps on the edges. Things up. I mean, it's kind of probably an unnecessary step. Like, I think there is a faster way using the wand tool or something and selecting the area around the line art, but this kind of has the added bonus of forcing me to pause and look at what I'm coloring for a longer time, so I can spot areas where I might have messed up or made a mistake. Just because I have to go back and look at the edges sometimes, which is good because I've caught a lot of things that way that I might have just, used the fill bucket, dumped it in, and moved along without really thinking about it. So I'll just outline her hair quickly. Fix that up around the edges. And add some detail and shape because her hair is kind of moving as she's, standing. Kind of dramatic, but, it works in a way. And that is that. Thank you for tuning in and watching me do the flats. I hope to try and start doing these on a regular basis, but, time is a thing. And thank you for reading, and thank you for your support of Follower and Messenger.